Good morning and welcome, or good afternoon and welcome to this third round of the ISDP series of Korea Strategic Talks. My name is Mats Engman and I'm head of the Korea Center at ISDP here in Stockholm. These talks aims to promote dialogue and exchange of views related to the developments on the Korean peninsula and in the region. The first two rounds took place last year of these strategic talks where we discussed the regional developments and at the second talks the situation in DPRK. Today we are starting the third round of talks focusing on the domestic political situation in South Korea following the presidential election 3rd June. We strive to have a series of at least two conversations within a rather short time span, covering the same issues but from different perspectives. This, we believe, will enable us to identify possible differences in understanding, assessments, and policies. So following today's strategic talk, we have another talk coming up on the 17th of June, covering the same topics, but this time with two US-Korea experts. But back to today's talks. I'm very pleased to have two eminent scholars with me today to guide us through the possible implications of the Yoon 3 presidential election in South Korea. First, I would like to introduce Professor Lim. She is currently a professor at the Division of International Studies, Kongju National University. Her areas of specialization include international cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, comparative and global governance, energy, nuclear, and climate change policies of East Asian countries. She currently also serves as a member of the Policy Advisory Committee for the Ministry of Unification. Professor Lim has taught at several universities in the United States and Korea, including Johns Hopkins University, Yonsei University, and Korea University. And she has been a researcher and a visiting fellow at several academic institutions. Professor Jae Seung Lee is a professor and the Jean Monnet Chair at Korea University's College of Graduate School of International Studies. He directs the Jean Monnet EU Center of Excellence and the Nordic Benelux Center. He is a specialist in international political economy. His research focuses on regional cooperation, energy security, and European affairs. Professor Lee has frequently contributed to major Korean newspapers and has appeared as a commentator on international media as well as several Korean media. I've asked each speaker to make a short introduction, and that will be followed by our conversation around the potential fallout from the presidential election. So, with this short introduction and welcome, I will hand over the microphone to you, Professor Lim. So please, EJ.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning there in Stockholm. And it's very hot day here in Korea. It's a very good thing. I mean, to have a conversation virtually with our dear friends and colleagues in Europe and even in other regions too. Again, as kindly introduced by the General Engman, my name is Eunjung Lim, and I'd love to just share my quick analysis on the latest presidential election, and then I'm very happy to have an open conversation discussion with you. So let me briefly share again my slides. I didn't just prepare many things, but I just wanted to quickly show the some numbers, interesting numbers. So, for example, my just initial remark will be less than 5 minutes. I will keep myself very efficient. So this is the turnout, voters turnout. So this time the turnout was pretty high. It was highest ever. As you can see, of course, right after the democratization, it was very high, but it's also counted as one of the highest in the history. And voter turnout was that much high, it reflects, which indicates that again the Korean voters were enthusiastically joined the election. And this is an election result by region. So, most probably important region is, my university is actually here in Kongju. But actually these, middle ground is very important in Korean politics. These two, actually this region is regarded as so-called a swing state, like Pennsylvania in the United States. So this time, as you can see, this middle ground, they chose again the Democratic Party, and Seoul too. Seoul also chose the Democratic Party. So which of course contributed to the result of the President Lee's victory. And this is another like interesting data. As you can see, this is early voting turnout by region. But this time especially, the so-called controversy surrounding the early voting was very severe. So this graph actually shows you clear division between the region where Democratic Party is more supported and the regions where the Conservative Party is more supported. To make a long story short, more conservative regions, they showed their very hesitance or reluctance to go to the early voting. So they preferred the day of the voting rather than early voting. But the regions who chose again the Democratic Party, they show, for example, Gwangju or Jeonnam, Jeonbuk, they show a very high early voting turnout. So we see regional division even in the early voting participation. And another interesting thing is and of course, in this time, we did have a third candidate whose name is Lee Jun-seok, the 40-year-old Harvard graduate, again, a politician. But he really did a good job, especially among the 20. But if you add up this conservative number, actually compared to the last election, again, when President Yoon was elected, it didn't change that much. So what I'm trying to say is, of course, the voters, conservative voters were divided, but at the same time, we see this kind of, again, the generational differences. Again, people who are in the 40 and the 50, they show very strong support for the Democratic Party, which indicates that they were super angry about the President Yoon. And this is another very interesting data, even though it is not, of course, demographically speaking, big number, but Seoul National University, they conducted their own survey, and interestingly, the most supported candidate among those presidential candidate by the Seoul National University student was, again, amazingly Lee Jun-seok. Again, he won almost more than actually 1/3. So this, of course, you see clear division by gender too. But what I'm trying to say is, again, the more like so-called again, quotation mark here, so-called elite, again, the Seoul National University student, they showed their preference again for Mr. Lee Jun-seok, not Mr. Lee Jae-myung. So this is another like interesting public survey data, which was conducted by EAI, East Asia Institute. Actually, it was done in January 22 and 23, more than 1,000 people. So most, almost half of the Korean people, they say, I'm a kind of neutral, or I'm independent, I'm in the middle. So the more, actually, compared to 4 years ago, again, the more people actually showed that kind of tendency. Again, all this favorability toward each party, again, actually negative, actually rose in both party, but obviously conservative, they were disliked more by majority. And politicians too, interestingly, again, of course, former President Yoon is disliked very much but at the same time, I'm sorry to say this, but the sitting President Lee is also pretty much disliked by so many people. So this society is very much again divided. So if I have more time, I can probably talk about this kind of thing too, because which was pretty surprising to me, because especially among the younger people, they said maybe I can be okay. In some case, dictatorship can be even better better than the democracy. This is a shocking, again to me, shocking number. But if I have more time, I can come back to this. Let me just quickly, I will just finish within 1 minute. Again, the perception to the U.S., of course, regardless of partisanship, now more than 80% of Korean people say U.S. is definitely the most important, and the relationship should be absolutely cooperative. And toward Japan, it has been improving too. Toward China, toward Russia, again, as you see, it's a very deteriorating. And interestingly, regardless of partisanship. So these were the actual figures I wanted to share. So number one, again, still the society is very much divided. But regarding number two, regarding the foreign policy, we do see more, probably less ideological, or we can probably discuss about this issue.
Mm.
Is it really less ideological or more ideological? Now, majority people really prioritize, again, the even cooperation with the, of course, the US is number one important, but the whole perception about the China has been declining. Russia, absolutely. The perception toward the Japan has been improving. So what does that mean? Again, especially for a leader like President Lee, who prefers more pragmatism in the foreign affairs. So this is my initial, again, the analysis. So I'm very much looking forward to the open discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, TJ. And some interesting, I think we'll need to come back to this slide where you indicated the kind of what I interpreted as a kind of authoritarian sentiment or whatever. So we'll come back to that. But I'll also now like to give the microphone to Professor Lee. So Jae Seung, please, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. And once again, I'm also very glad to join the seminar organized by ISDP. And well, it's glad to meet many good friends. Professor Lim explained quite in detail about this election and shows many the pictures, the key features of this election. And I will probably add up some of the implications and some potential challenges, well, some opportunities, but some potential challenges. And also, I will briefly mention about the Korea's the foreign policy direction, and also we do have choices, opportunities, and challenges. Okay. First about the election, the biggest meaning of this election. President Lee's victory marks the end of a political vacuum that has participated since last December's impeachment crisis and martial law the cases. In this sense, the election normalized governance in Korea. And well, once again, Korea has shown a strong resilience of democracy. But in this election, actually, we observed the widening fault line in Korean society across generation, region, gender, and ideology. So, and well, the generation split was quite visible, and gender polarization was quite stark and between young men leaning more conservative side this time, and young women favoring a liberal candidate. So in short, President Lee won the election, but he inherited a fractured nation in that sense. Though one of his big the task should be how to recombine the split into a more comprehensive manner and inclusive manner. Government efficiency. Now, at this moment, the Democrat Party has a super majority in the National Assembly, and his presidency, and together with Lee's presidency, this government is well positioned to pursue structural reforms and any other policies in a highly efficient way. There is basically no big obstacle. So it will be efficient, but at the same time, this concentration of power may, well, on the one hand, well, it can enhance government efficiency in the short run, but also some concerns on the division of power in our the democracy framework. So there might be a temptation if the legal reforms are used to target the Supreme Court or prosecutor's office, those institutions that actually challenge it, his candidacy, then it could shift the balance of power away from judicial independence. So I think one key task of Korean democracy is this judicial independence. Korea have restored the electoral democracy for sure, but the rule of law now faces a new test, and that will be the kind of more the test for a more matured Korean democratic resilience. And in recent days, President Lee quickly appointed some key the cabinet members, but he also suggested the public recommendation for the cabinet member, which is a quite new and fresh experiment. So we are waiting for the recommendation. So well, and well, we are actually doing a new experiment and hope we could find really the right person. In terms of diplomacy, President Lee has embraced the notion of pragmatic diplomacy, pragmatic and national interest driven. And well, pragmatic diplomacy centered on advancing national interest. So while this approach appears very sensible, but it also raises concern for some countries that Korea may prioritize short-term gains over consistent principles. So one of the diplomatic tasks is how to give the trust and confidence for the international society that Korea is responsible and the principal, the actor. But Korea should face, well, it is facing, and it is a reality that Korea lies between the US-China competition. And also there is the dilemma of Japan. The previous Yoon administration, for example, prioritized Korea-Japan reconciliation and Korea-Japan-US trilateral partnership. So President Lee mentioned that he appreciates. He certainly gave values to this partnership, but in his cabinet and in the government, well, there are more hawkish, more nationalist-driven the groups, and more pragmatic and alliance-driven the groups. So at some point, well, I guess the first step would be a pragmatic step. But what will be the next step? And maybe at some point, there might be a stress test between this duality, the more pragmatic side, or more kind of the sovereignty or the national sentiment-driven the stance, and also emphasizing China, Russia, and North Korea. So and one the forthcoming litmus test would be the Korea's attendance in the NATO summit in Hague. But President Lee announced that he will first join the G7 meeting in very short time, in the very near future. North Korea, ultimately, the progress in inter-Korean relations will hinge on the trajectory of U.S.-North Korea dialogue. But this government, certainly the government will focus a lot on normalizing and restoring inter-Korean dialogue. Certainly there is a big hurdle, well, given Pyongyang's alignment with Russia and is the entrenched nuclear posture may make a certain breakthrough quite easily. So it may need a caution and perseverance, but ultimately this government will try very hard to restore the peace building process on the Korean peninsula. Some more economic, more the prudence, but actually a lot more focus will be given to the social welfare side, support for small and medium-sized enterprises, and green transformation on the renewable side. So this kind of social basic income and basic society ideas are widely being discussed, and also the strong momentum of digital transition and innovations are still there. Okay, so yes, certainly that Korea is facing lots of challenges in the social side, political side, economic side, and as we may well know, the international environment is not so calm and soft. We are sailing in a very high sea, but Korea launched the new government with quite efficient the government. So we will deal with challenges. We will cope with challenges.
Thank you very much, Jae Seung. So for these initial remarks, and I'm happy to come back to some of this, but I like to get back first to let's say the immediate domestic and the election things. And I basically have 2 to 3 questions that I would like to ask you. First of all, both of you have mentioned this kind of increase in polarization in the South Korean society, gender, generation, regional, ideologically. So, and from what I understand, one of the things that the new President Lee has mentioned is he wants to be a president for all.
Yeah.
And I suppose that is trying to bridge the gap, both the gap from this divide, but maybe also some of the turmoil that we have experienced since 3 December. So what more in detail do you think that president for all may include? What kind of concrete actions do you see President Lee trying to pursue? That's one. And the second one is, this was a rather severe defeat for the Conservative Party, PPP. We also notice a split that you mentioned within the Conservative bloc, with the new Reform Party gaining some ground from this rather young presidential candidate. So what do you think will happen within the Conservative bloc? A consolidation between these two fractions, if I may say so, or that we will go into a direction of a more multi-party system in South Korea, where more than 2 parties, maybe 3 or 4 parties. So if I would allow you to say a few words on these 2 things, the president for all aspect and the situation within the Conservative bloc. So please, EJ.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you for asking those 2 important questions. Well, this specific election was not a regular one, as we all know, which means, again, the Democratic Party they kept, of course, saying that, we should be, we should be judging for the righteousness, justice, real true democracy. So they keep saying that, this is not a political purge. This is a right reaction, right response, to judge on the what former President Yoon did, or his colleague did, or even cabinet members. So they trying to investigate, and they just started up the 3 different special prosecutors too, for each for the 3 the different, again, the issues. But well, according to the election result, still, of course, almost half of the voter who supported, again, the President Lee, they say, this is not a political purge, and that this is a right process to just make the democracy come back. But the other will say, they still have a very deep conspiracy like doubt. But who knows? I mean, anything can be happening in the real world, but without the really concrete evidence, again, that I can't again just say that there was a rigged election. But they have a very strong doubt about the election process, or committee So again, the other half will be unhappy with all this process. So again, it's very much dependent on how you see, again, which one is really represents the real democracy. Again, the Professor Lee Jae Seung pointed out this legal issues, and then division of power. Again, we have 3 different legislative, and the judiciary, and then executive. But now all this balance is really is not there. So again, the conservative supporter, they will be very much doubtful and worried about that. And the other will be against, keep saying that, again, that definitely whatever they did, it deserve, again, deserve the current thing. So it's difficult. It's difficult to say which one is really correct. So even though President Lee is trying to be the president for all, but I think still he will face the pretty big challenges from the ground. Even though what he's trying to do is right, again, if you agree with the Democratic supporters' point of view. And the second point, again, the conservative, Mr. Lee, well, he might be very iconic and symbolic figure of the 20s, especially male, because obviously 20 female voter, they more than, again, majority, of course, they supported the Democratic Party. So we can probably think about several issues. Again, number one is this, their experience in the military service. I think there can be one big thing, because they literally saw the reality, again, what North is doing every day, or even, I'm sorry, I don't have any offensive purpose, but what China is doing in our sea, for example. So they literally saw that. So, they might have more very, deep doubts about our neighbor, or secondly, they do feel like, I spent like more than a year in the military service, but what do you guys do? I mean, the female, what do you guys do? Right. So that kind of, unfairness, they are more sensitive about. Or as I showed, even authoritarian might be better for some case. That means I feel like, these people who are in 20, they are very much, I feel like, worried about the economic future of this country. So basically, we were very much successful. So-called development or dictatorship was very much successful. So probably they of course they didn't leave that era, but they might pursue that kind of efficiency, again, the economic growth, those kind of things, very growth-oriented mind, I feel like. So several factors, it looks like contributed to the generational gap or gender gap. So having said that, the conservative, Korean conservative can have a unity. I don't know. To be very honest, I'm pretty skeptical about that because they
Okay.
don't really have a strong leadership now. So that might be my answer for your
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Any comments to those two questions, Jae Seung?
Okay, first, the president for all. Yes, certainly, President Lee is trying very hard to address the social polarization. So yes, the slogan "President for all" certainly means a very kind of engaging approach, but this will require more than inclusive rhetoric. So it should be shown actually in the policy scheme. So policy measures such as bridging youth employment gaps, addressing housing insecurity, well, this is a huge issue, and also responding to gender-based concern must follow. So there are many the policy, the task, and policy challenges. So, well, but certainly the symbolic unity it means means a lot at the beginning, but a very careful handling of social policy and also macroeconomic policy will be needed. And maybe at some point, the key point, well, especially the appointment of key policy makers and or some kind of the actual coalition across the parties and across the political spectrum will be quite needed. So we are starting well, he started his first step for the president for all, but he has to keep going on to achieve this big agenda and big goal. And for the Conservative Party, I would say the former President Yoon basically blew up his one party from the inside. We are calling this suicide bombing. The martial law declaration was suicide bombing, and the conservative people, the People Power Party (PPP) is still in shock. Still, they are divided, confused, and not sure where to go next. So they are in a back, well, still in a shock condition. And with 3 years, we have 3 years until the next parliamentary election, which means, well, somehow the parliamentary members will have sufficient time. They are not in a huge hurry, and that make the reform somewhat slow. But so reform needed, but well. Maybe within a few weeks, the party will convene the PEN, like the PPP, the convention, and will redesign. But a lot of concern, also a lot of concern. There are some expectations, but also a lot of concern whether they are fully ready to make the fundamental restructuring. And the new Reform Party led by Eunjung Lim isn't doing much better, well, to some degree, but it got the over 8%. This is quite significant, the number, but not still less than 10%. And the leader, Eunjung Lim, made some controversial, actually the comment about the gender issue during the TV interview, and that actually hurt his image as a young kind of the future oriented the leader. So and at this moment, New Reform Party has only a very few seats in the National Assembly. So you may have some of the leader, Eunjung Lim, will have some national visibility, but the actual influence in the National Assembly could be quite limited. So everybody agrees that conservatives need to regroup and rebuild, but no one knows when or where and how that would start and that will happen. But I believe the healthy conservative will make healthy progressive and vice versa. So if Korea is really is wanting to move ahead toward a more mature democracy, I guess the reform of conservative party is not a choice, it's a must.
Okay, thank you very much. And it will be interesting to look. Maybe the young leader of the Reform Party is playing for time and trying to position himself, for the next, like you say, parliamentary election or the presidential election. I like now to kind of change a little bit perspective and look outside South Korea on foreign policy relations, because there seems to be a rather, from where I sit anyhow, a rather significant change between the Yoon policy and the policy that so far we have heard from President Lee. Jae Seung, you mentioned pragmatic diplomacy as one of his key features. But what about, if we try to look a little bit closer, what de facto will he be able to do to try to kind of calm down the situation in the border region with North Korea? So what de facto do you think he will try to achieve? And is North Korea really ready to try to accommodate that? That's one. And the other one will be this balancing act between China and United States. We know that United States is pushing a lot of pressure on their key partners in East Asia, Japan, Australia, the Philippines, South Korea, to be taking a clear stand against China. And I think one of the issues that President Lee has been advocated is to be a little bit more, if I use the word, accommodating towards China. And he is apparently already invited him to the APEC meeting in South Korea later this autumn. So these two aspects, the North Korean angle and the China angle, please. And if I may turn to you, Jae Seung, first now this time.
Okay. Well, there had been during just past few days. It was actually yesterday that Korea stopped the sending out the big speaker message to North Korea, and also North Korea stopped sending the speaker messages. Well, actually the noise was so big, and a lot of people actually suffered. So it may show some kind of symbolic gesture, a very small but symbolic gesture of managing the tension. But still, I guess that's still the fundamental issues are we have to face the fundamental issue which will be North Korea's the nuclear program and ICBM the program. So it would take some time. Certainly the Korea's wants certainly will prefer detente. The government would work for the detente, but regarding the fundamental the core issues, we still need to tune with Pyongyang and also Washington D.C. because the United States eventually will have to show some kind of the agreement also with South Korea in handling North Korea. It will take some time. And North Korea is still fighting in Russia versus Ukraine. So and also North Korea relation it ties is very, very firm. So it's not just China, North Korea issues. So there are multiple angles and multiple layers of issues to be handled. So so prudence will be needed, but when the time is right. I cannot say when, but when the time is ripe, then the new government will try to restore inter-Korean relations, and and seek for the peace building measures. But in the meantime, yes, certainly the deterrence measure, especially against the nuclear and missile, that is another reality. Well, we cannot skip that reality. So maintaining Korea-US alliance, yes, still that is key. Extended nuclear deterrence, that is another key. Well, maybe some step-by-step measures will be needed, and still it might be a little bit too early. It might be a little bit too early to announce those issues. But the first remark and first like the phone call with the U.S. and the key leaders will show that Korea at this moment will take a more the prudent measure, a prudent stance. And we will wait and see what other options we will have. Yes, previously the progressive government had well, it's not like, well, has shown a more accommodative the stance toward China, and we can also reasonably expect that sort of the stance. Well, China is a big neighboring countries, and well, somehow that is our geopolitical fate.
Yes.
But also the Korean, well, this morning I saw that the Korean public opinion data that still 2/3 of Korean people have a very negative stance toward China. So also, yes, in the APEC meeting, certainly, well, and hopefully all the leaders will join. So there might be more chances, more platform for dialogue. So certainly dialogue is needed and more pragmatic approach is needed. But I guess it's still too early to play the balancing, and still, well, the government is very cautious in using this term kind of balancing, because in this turbulent geopolitical transformation, well, the balancing, well, in the long run, the balancing could be the long term, the objective, but in the short run, there could be many other more urgent issues to be tackled. Well, you cannot be done all at once. There is no silver bullet to do that. But well, during past week or so, we have seen, well, if Korea had made the first step, then first step was reaffirming the U.S. alliance. But we will have many other steps left.
Okay, over to you, EJ. What's your take on how President Lee will go about trying to kind of calm down the situation and the relations with North Korea, and also this about his kind of more accommodating stance to China and what that will imply in his relation with Washington?
Sure. I agree with Professor Lee's remarks, so I don't probably need to repeat what he just said. But additionally, I probably want to explain more like an internal dynamic within, the ruling, not party, the ruling, government. Because everybody was very attentive to what President Lee, who President Lee will be appointing for the foreign affairs / again the defense related position. So, for example, former ambassador to Russia, Mr. Ri Song Nak, he was appointed as a national security advisor. And to make a long story short, people who are more realistic, people sighed. Oh, people feel like a little bit relieved because he has been the career diplomat for his lifetime. So he can be, again, literally realistic. And he does, of course, have a very good diplomatic manner. So everybody, were more like relieved. But at the same time, he also appointed, again, the former Minister of Unification, Mr. Lee Jong-seok, as the head of the intelligence. So what does this mean? Again, I feel like he certainly will. Maybe this is not really right now. You know, as Professor Lee just mentioned, we probably need to be waiting for the next step, but this is not really the timing for the government to push forward the dialogue with the North yet. But certainly, again, the former Minister of Unification, Lee Jong-suk, came back to the intelligence head, which indicates that I feel again this government certainly will prioritize a relationship with the North again. So you know, this government is we you know, it's only second week, so we still are trying to you know, read what they are trying to do, but at least for now it looks like they are, you know, President Lee is trying to show both. Again, I'm prioritizing those conventional diplomacy, but at the same time, I also do prioritize, you know, restoration of the relationship, inter-Korean relationship. The thing is, I'm not against, you know, those idea, but the thing is the reality, you know, on the ground, and all this global, you know, restructuring of power or realignment of power. Of course, we don't want to be you know, in a bad position with the China. China is our closest friend and neighbor, and you know, the #1 trading partner. However, as long as again the US-China competes for future technology, you know, as long as the competition is going on, it's not that easy again to be a friend for everyone. So
Right.
at some point, you know, at some point probably we really need to sort out our priorities. So well, I think this government is pretty, in that sense, faces huge challenge. Again, though we definitely need to pursue our own technological development. We absolutely cannot give up extended deterrence together with the US and even with the Japan, but at the same time, we don't want to aggravate China too much. So again, at some point, I think the ruling, I'm sorry, the current president will show his own priority, but for now, I don't have clear answer yet.
Okay.
Mm.
One of, thank you very much, both of you. One of the key kind of policies in the foreign policy arena for former President Yoon has been his kind of improvement in relation with Japan and the trilateral relationship between Japan, South Korea, and United States. EJ, you have studied and worked with Japan quite a lot. So,
Yeah.
what do you see going forward when it comes to South Korea-Japan relation? Will President Lee continue, you know, trying to maintain and foster the relations that Yoon has created, or do you see a risk of a little bit of a backsliding, where the
Well,
historic arguments come forward again?
well, I want to remain more optimistic because, you know, for example, the number who travel between two countries, oh my God, it surpassed the 10 million already. And this year, it is highly likely to exceed again the 10 million between the two. So which means, you know, people already enjoy all this, you know, better relationship compared to a few years ago. And this year is 60th anniversary of
Yeah.
diplomatic ties again between the two countries, which is again another historical moment. And again, President Lee, you know, everybody was watching. I mean, of course, you know, Mr. Trump was the first one who, you know, President Lee talked on the phone, but who will be the next again next to the President Trump? And well, for the Japan specialist, well, we were pretty happy to see that again, that his second phone call was with the Prime Minister Ishiba.
Yeah.
And then third phone call was the President Xi, but it was longer, longer than the phone call with the Ishiba. So, well, he shows, I think he keeps trying to show kind of balance between all this major neighbor. And again, he knows already, again, all this people's perception toward Japan has been changing. And I
Okay.
think President Lee views this because he's very sensitive with all this, change among the people. So as long as, again, the mood is not that bad compared to before, I think, again, I want to remain more optimistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jae Seung, one of your research areas is regional cooperation. What's your take on the current situation when it comes to relations between South Korea and Japan and moving forward? A continuation of gradual improvement, kind of flatten out, or do you see a kind of risk for a backsliding?
Well, this new government is unlikely reverse the progress
Okay.
that was made during the past few years. And as President Lim mentioned, yes, well, especially when you look at the people-to-people exchanges, Korea and Japan is actually quite close. But I do see many political landmines in between Korea and Japan. This year actually marked the 60th anniversary of normalization of Korea-Japan relation. This is the big anniversary year, and somehow we have to, well, and so far the both embassies and then the government prepared a lot of the event. I think the ball is not just only on the Korean side, but also on the Japanese side, because I think, well, the Japanese reaction and Japanese the messaging to South Korea will be very important. Well, so if Japan would take more the pragmatic and more kind of the cooperative stance, then highly likely Korea will have a more chance to continue and enhance the relation. But in any case, if Abe style or more kind of the right wing, the rhetoric, it would come back, then that will also agitate it. That will also agitate the Korean kind of national more sovereignty, the groups, and they are not so friendly toward Japan. So, well, the Korea is I would say is cautious. We don't want to go back, but the ball is not entirely on the Korean side. It was just very, I guess the Japan's role is very essential.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there is one major area where we need to spend some time, and that's the economic situation and economic policies. I mean, I just read an article where I think it was the Bank of Korea that downgraded the some of the financial aspects going forward, and that you had kind of a more well flat growth for the first quarter of 2025. So there are some severe economic challenges. And what do you see going forward, President Lee and his new administration, his new cabinet doing in order to kind of revitalize the economy? Is it going to be, let's say, the traditional progressive policy with a lot of state-run initiatives that the state takes care of it, or do you see it will be more of a kind of a liberal economy where you try to incentivize and deregulate so that you will vitalize the economy? So what lies ahead when it comes to the economic challenges, basically? So over to you, Jae Seung.
Okay, I'm actually hearing two voices. One is the deregulation. We have a lot of regulation issues that is hindering the progress, especially in the digital transformation and innovation. So there should be the regulation. But on the other hand, for example, the revision of commercial laws or the kind of the new regulation measures, in a sense, controlling, well, in the name of social justice, of course, but some measures are not business friendly. So more the surveillance. I would say more surveillance uh, uh, on the corporate side. And well, actually, the basic income idea or basic society idea as well, the key policy is focusing a lot on the social side. So in that sense, certainly, but that is one thing Korea should achieve, domestically. But at the same time, we are sailing in a very tough sea. So the economic growth in case of Korea will largely depend on the external economy, our trade, our investment, and for that, Korea really need to start and finish the negotiation with the United States. I guess that will be the key, and the kind of maintaining more kind of the progressive and constructive market relation, relation with China will be another the economic relation with the global South, Southeast Asia. Well, Korea is basically the global player in terms of the global trade. So, but this is a rainy day, certainly. So we have to hang on. But well, I still think the key is the innovation. How much innovation the Korea can keep and Korean companies can keep. So yes, well, I would say somehow at this moment I'm hearing the two voices, but Korea does not have a luxury to sacrifice one. Well, we have to achieve more domestic social and economic justice, was certainly, but at the same time, we have to survive in the global market. So yes, whether we like it or not, which side would come first or second, but they are the two fit. But we have to maintain the objective for sure.
Okay, EJ, what do you see going forward when it comes to the economic side? I mean, we have the threat of tariffs on ordinary trade. We have the tariffs on steel, which is a major export item for South Korea. So how does President Lee, do you believe, handle this?
I know, I think, economy is absolutely #1 priority now for Korean people. Of course, this judgment or penalty on the wrongdoings of the previous government, that was a big thing, a big slogan, and that was the top priority. However, again, economy is the reality, and South Korea's growth rate has been declining significantly. And for example, KDI, Korean Development Institute, they expected like less than even 1%. So we have not experienced this kind of growth rate before. So it does affect psychology too. So, South Korean economy is like a kind of riding a bicycle. If you don't pedal, again, you will be falling down. So that is why I think President Lee also said that growth is first. Growth is again the strategy actually for the society. I had an interesting discussion with my colleagues. I spent many years in Japan, so I saw all this long recession. So we probably need to be prepared psychologically for that kind of period. And my friends, my colleagues, they told me that no, never. We can't accept it, and we can't survive like that. And I think almost everyone in the society still wants to have a good growth rate. The thing is how. Again, the comparative advantage, again, we lost in our conventional comparative advantage in many manufacturing sector. And for example, AI or those advanced technology, even though we are pretty doing a good job, but still China is these days scary scary in this highly advanced technology. So how can you really restore our industrial competitiveness? That's again fundamental question, I think, for this government. So through what? Again, as you mentioned, through just state-driven, state-led model, or again the fairness for everyone. Already labor cost in this country is pretty high. That is one reason why again the more and more Korean companies leaving this country. Of course, tariff is a one thing, but labor is pretty high already. Or
Yeah.
energy price is high too. It's becoming higher. So if so, you know, all these factories and companies, more and more companies will be leaving this country. So that's really serious problem. So how can we again bring those factories and companies back to our shore? Reshoring again is I think that's a fundamental question for the government.
Thank you very much. Our time is almost finished, but I would like to allow you one final comment. And if I may, can you, on a more personal basis, say something of what for you was the most significant outcome of the election? What is your main takeaway from the election? So if I may ask you, EJ, what's your main takeaway from the election?
Again, it's very divided, very divided society. I think it's of course path dependent. Again, we experience so many things. Again, the dictatorship and democratization, industrialization within such a short period of time. So society changes dramatically. So it's pretty much path dependent, but at the same time, it's a structural problem too. You know, look at the United States as well. And as the presidential system, we have a very similar problem. All the stalemate situations going on and on and on, and people feel fatigued with this. So in that sense, it really undermines our potential for the further growth. So structural reform is pretty, I feel like, necessary, but it's never easy. It's never easy. So, but again, the election result, I think, still shows how divided deeply the society is, sadly.
Thank you, EJ. Professor Lee, what's your major takeaway from the election, please?
I would once again first say we have normalized governance, and Korea has shown a strong kind of democratic resilience that, well, the martial law or any kind of authoritarian that the measures would not be tolerated. So, and in all these procedures have been made in a peaceful way, according to the rules. So, well, I guess the Korea stands firm in terms of the electoral the democracy. And what I also, but this election was not a normal election or election in a normal situation. We had unexpected, totally unexpected the impeachment, the crisis. So we were in the middle of the political crisis, and in a sense, well, the both parties were not that super ready to run a deep and well-prepared campaign, because the right wing, the Conservative Party, was divided, fragmented, was shocked, and also progressive side also had the person's candidates' legal risk and other factors. So somehow we didn't have a lot of chance to talk about the real policy direction, etc. Yeah. However, what I want and what I still believe is we are learning. We are learning over the past few years, past few decades. We had many kind of tragic political trajectory of previous governments, and well, that ended up not in a happy stories. But we are learning what went right and what went wrong. And if we are learning and accumulating our collective intelligence and collective knowledge, then I hope that Korea will be in a right trajectory to achieve more than mature democracy.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Lim and Professor Lee. It's been a pleasure listening to your insights and understanding of the situation. And I hope we will have another round of very interesting discussions with our two US colleagues next week. And thank you all for watching and listening to this strategic talk. We will post this online after we have done some editing. So please stay tuned, and thank you once more, Professor Lim and Professor Lee, and hope to see you soon in Seoul sometime.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And one thing, I saw just question right now, in the board. So I'm
Okay.
sorry
Yeah.
we didn't answer. So if you just email me, I'm more than happy to to respond to that question. I'm sorry, but I just saw that. Sorry about that.
Okay, well,
Yes.
well, if it's still recording or edited.
Yeah.
But, yes, well, I do see. Well, as a scholar working on Korea, U.S., NATO, the agenda, I hope the Korea's
The questions are all about the Korea-Europe relation.
And Europe has been a very reliable, the good partners,
Sure.
and especially the partner for the peace building on the Korean peninsula in many the different sense. So in that sense, I hope Korea will maintain, continue, and develop the common ground with the European countries. Well,
Sure.
I'm saying as a scholar, but I hope that this platform, there are many room, a new opportunity for these two players to work together.
Okay, one short EJ, if you want to.
Yeah, likewise, same question. I same answer. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
have so thank you. Please just
Thank
don't
you.
hesitate to email me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Feel free to contact me.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.